Right, welcome. It is still the Ultimate Money Show here on Raypower 100.5 FM this morning. Good morning to you. For those of us who are just tuning in, it is the midweek. Welcome back from the network studio, and it is time for us here in the local studio to check out the newspapers and get to bring you the stories that are dominating the papers this Wednesday morning. My name is Dima, and I won't be doing this alone because Chooks is right here with me in the studio. Good morning, Chooks.
Yeah, good morning, Dima. Good morning, Abuja. Good morning, Nigerians. Super excited to be here and super excited to look at what the stories are saying, on the papers. And I'm sure there are a whole lot of interesting stories on the front pages this morning.
And good morning to you two who are watching us right now live on YouTube, because we are live on YouTube at Raypower Abuja. In case you just want to watch that, head over to YouTube right now and check out the stories. We'll be starting off this morning with Al Jazeera Nigeria with a midweek edition where the big story is on the PDP crisis. And it says, Appeal Court voiding of 2025 convention, decisive blow against impunity. That is coming from Wike, as Seraki urges PDP leaders to end litigation, conduct fresh convention. Turaki-led faction holds emergency meeting. Very necessary. The story is on page 9 of Al Jazeera Nigeria this morning. Federal government inaugurates youth agribusiness land initiative. Read that on page 17. Competition, consumer protection laws, most dynamic litigated fields, coming from the CJN. Read that story on page 9. Meanwhile, NLC, surprisingly here, I would want to say, hails federal government's enhanced gratuity for retiring civil servants. Page 9 reads, surprisingly, because most times when you hear NLC, it's always demanding, but this time around, they are hailing the federal government for enhanced gratuity for retiring civil servants. The story, like I said, is on page 9. Now, police arrest alleged mastermind of Ebony Monarch's kidnap and killing. Good one there. Page 7, read. And on recapitalization deadline, 2 tier 1 bank begin merger talks. You can want to find out details on that story from page 15. US, Israel, Iran war diverts Nigeria LNG cargo to Asia. Page 14. And lastly, from Al Jazeera Nigeria, says Tinubu NFF, ex-Swan officials mourn legendary football administrator Onigbinde. This one opens on the front page here, continues on page 2. And that's it from Al Jazeera Nigeria this morning.
And to the Authority newspaper, we have PDP crisis. Let's accept appeal court's verdict, hold new convention. That's from Saraki. We must not jeopardize members' ambitions, he advises. Councils aggrieved leaders to end all litigation. Starts on the front page and continues on page 2. 2027, opposition too weak to stop Tinubu, from Val Ozigbo on page 5. Head of service probes fire outbreak at Federal Secretariat complex in Abuja, page 2. Senator Banigo, Rivers West, defects to APC, page 14. Tinubu mourns ex-Super Eagles coach Festus Onigbinde, page 2. Above the nameplate of the Authority newspaper, we have the Senate suspends plenary to honor late colleague Barinada Mpigi, page 13. Customs intercepts 6.3 billion naira expired drugs, codeine, security gear at Apapa, page 5. And 2027, Air Force Chief visits INEC, pledges logistics support, page 10. That's it for the Authority newspaper.
All right, now let us check out Nigerian Pilot newspaper this morning. The big story is on the Middle East conflict. Says federal government raises alarm. Says development may worsen cost of living in Nigeria if it persists. Warns that sustained instability in Middle East could lead to increases in prices of fuel, diesel, and others. Has already started increasing already. The crisis could have significant implications for Nigeria's economy, explaining that rising geopolitical tensions have already created uncertainty in global markets. The story is on page 8. 93 Nigerians arrested in Ghana over alleged internet fraud. Page 9, read. Over 1.7 million persons without job, skills in Benue, GMD BIPC speaking there. That one is on page 7. Meanwhile, 4 police officers remanded over Owo Day Market killings. Page 9 read, Plateau government cracks down on illegal miners. Okay, that story is on page 5. Now moving to above the nameplate of the Nigerian Parallel newspaper, court fixes April 15 for trial of Malami and Son over alleged terrorism offense. Page 7 there. PDP down to 17 senators as Igbalibo defects to APC. Page 7. Meanwhile, Governor Okpeyolo urges Edo youths to participate in police recruitment exercise, also on page 7. Lastly, from the Nigerian Parallel this morning, NCS strengthens stakeholder engagement with key industry traditional leaders. The story is on page 19.
And now to the New Telegraph, we have Middle East crisis, FG monitoring developments to safeguard economic stability. Block Hamas, face death, fire and fury. Trump warns Iran. Qatar to Iran, stop attacks. Or, goes on to read, Egypt increases energy prices, retains bread subsidy. 140 US service members wounded. Pages 2 and 3 covers that. Unilag ASU begins indefinite strike today over amputated salary. That's on page 5. Rising cost of fuel. Tinubu orders deployment of 100,000 kits for conversion of vehicles to CNG on page 5. Gumi, FG knows every terrorist by name, location, says he goes with police, other security agencies to negotiate with bandits. Page 2. We also have appeal court's judgment, plot to shut us out of 2027 contest. That's from the PDP, and that's on page 4. There's a study here on page 30. Increased fitness may amplify brain boost. Tinubu to Senate, confirm Oyedele as minister. That's on page 2. FG suspends $300 helicopter landing fee for 2 months. Page 2 as well. Nigerian spare parts dealers face deportation from Mozambique on page 7. Elections are as good as logistics. That's coming from INEC on page 3. Money laundering. CBN intensifies mechanism to curb menace. Page 25. An improved local refinery cuts Nigeria's petrol imports by 60% to 769 billion naira. Starts on the front page and continues on page 2. And that's it for the New Telegraph.
All right, now let us head over to the Daily Sun newspaper, where we have the big story. U.S. flags planned attacks on its facilities in Nigeria. The story is on page 26. Gumi accuses federal government of knowing terrorists, reveals how he goes with military police to negotiate with insurgents. That story is on page 6. Now, Enugu Air gets AOC in record time, targets regional flights by year end. Improvement, you would say. The story is on page 25. But in Zamfara State, fights over, I will support you, Matawali tells Governor Lawal. The story is on page 5. Tinubu orders quick rollout of 100,000 CNG kits to ease fuel increase pressure. Read that on page 27 of the Daily Sun this morning. Meanwhile, price relief fades as Dangote cuts petrol by 100 naira. That is, instead of 1,170, now it is 1,070 naira or thereabout. Trump threatens harsher strike if Iran disputes supply. That is disrupts supply rather. That is a rider to that story. And the story opens on the front page and continues on page 2. Lastly, from the Daily Sun, appeal court judgment. PDP leaders weigh options. Say reconciliation must be based on principle. Wike men step up plans for National Convention. Story is on pages 6 and 26. And that's it from the Daily Sun this morning.
All right, now to the daily assets. We have Tinubu approves all sector incentives, unlocks $20 billion Bonga Deepwater project. Project adds 150,000 barrels per day, creates 5,000 jobs. Dangote slashes fuel price by 100 naira as global crude supply slumps. Page 2. Unknown gunmen kill POS operator in Minna. Page 5. Madagascar military leader dissolves government in surprise move, page 26. Over 9,000 applicants show up for 1,170 police recruitment in Calabar, page 24. Security agents, emirs attend terrorist negotiation meetings, claims Gumi. FG aware of terrorist identities, location, says cleric. Residents protest block highway over insecurity in Ondo. That's starting off on the front page and continuing on page 3. Wike upgrades all traditional rulers in FCT, page 21. And that's it for the daily assets.
Now we check out the Observer's Times newspaper this morning. The big story says the North's dying health sector. Millions at risk as doctors flee. Rural Nigeria's reliance on community health workers and unlicensed doctors. Read our story on the very first page of the Observer's Times newspaper this morning, page 1. Now, on alleged terrorism, court adjourns Malami and Sons trial until April 15th. The story is on page 4. Federal government, World Bank inaugurate $500 million irrigation and power project. The story is on page 9. PDP Board of Trustees to meet today over appeal court judgment, page 8. Read there. Amechi accuses Tinubu and APC of anxiety over 2027. Meanwhile, Pete Edochie laments rising cost of basic amenities coming from the veteran actor there. The story is on page 8. Keyamo Oke's cash card payment at airport after traffic chaos. Very necessary. The story is on page 3. And lastly, from the Observer's Time, Saraki calls on PDP to end lawsuits, hold new national convention. It was on the front page here, continues on page 2. And that's it from the Observer's Times.
All right, now to the leadership newspaper. We have petrol price hike. Tinubu orders deployment of 100,000 CNG kits as transport fares surge. That's on page 4. Muthwang inaugurates 14-man advisory committee on state police, page 6. Turkey ready to increase bilateral trade with Nigeria, says envoy. Starts on the front page, continues on page 4. Dangote refinery slashes petrol gantry price to 1,075 naira per litre as oil dips on page 27. Aidatiwa meets Miyetti Allah to strengthen security in Ondo. That's on page 19. Nigeria will never surrender to terrorists. That's from the president on page 6. Wike-backed PDP prepares for convention. Makinde says crisis will pass. Page 7. FG begins evacuation of wailing Nigerians from Iran. That's from NITCOM on page 7. Matawale to Dauda Lawal, I'll support your vision for Zamfara, page 7. That's it for the leadership newspaper. Go on a short break and return with business. Do stay with us.
Yeah.
This is the newspaper review.
All right, now to the business NG. We have transport fares surge across Nigeria as US-Iran conflict pushes petrol prices beyond reach. We also have panic in Abuja communities as prolonged water scarcity leaves residents struggling. That's on page 2. CBN orders banks to deploy AI systems to combat money laundering. Federal High Court orders final forfeiture of 81.1 million naira stolen from Sterling Bank glitch, page 2. Nigeria records 1.7 trillion naira trade surplus in quarter 4 2025, despite drop in crude oil exports, page 2. And that's it for business stories from the Business NG. And this morning we took a look at the Authority newspaper, the New Telegraph, the Daily Assets, and the Leadership newspaper.
And also from this end, we also checked out Al Jazeera Nigeria, Nigerian Pilots, Daily Sun, and the Observer's Times newspaper, all loaded with very interesting stories and headlines, you will say, this morning.
Absolutely.
Starting off with the PDP. Now, the Turaki-led faction is about to have an emergency meeting. You will want to ask, isn't it a little bit too late preparing for emergency meeting? You know, given the fact that the timetable and everything is just under your nose.
Well, I would say it's a little bit too late because they lost out in the courts, based on the convention. They lost to the Wike FCT minister-led, faction.
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonable to see how they can try to get their acts together. But one thing, Saraki, Bukola Saraki, that's former Senate president, was saying is that
Start a new
everybody
one.
needs to just put aside litigations, because I'm probably even expecting the Taraki-led faction to probably take it, further to a higher court, probably hoping to get a different, ruling on that convention that was held, in Ibadan. They said the court saying that that was against
null
the
and
rules
void,
and
yeah.
constitutions and all of that. So will they eventually come to an agreement? I don't know. But one key thing is, well, that the FCT minister has also talked about, is that they really have not sorted out the problems they had in 2023. They've not sorted out these problems. Even in 2015, the issue of, that zoning, it's a key
still
thing there.
Still lingering.
Yes, because 2015, there were individuals who were not happy, or I think that was 2011, sorry, President Goodluck Jonathan, was running. It was supposed to be the northern time. Umaru Musa Yar'Adua didn't finish, so they were supposed to, keep up with that. It also happened, the likes of Atiku Abubakar was running in 2023, which was not supposed to be, according to, what's his name now? The FCT minister, because he also supported a northern candidate in 2015. So now, all those issues of zoning is still coming up. Is PDP going to give its ticket to the south, and all of that? You've even had governors, defect from the PDP and coming out to say that's talking about even northern governors saying that, they're going to support a southern candidate. So that's going to the APC. Obviously, there's also a consensus that it's going to be Mr. President, who's from the south. So how will PDP, go? What line would the PDP go? That's also affecting the other oppositions. What line would a party like the ADC go? What line would a party like, Labour go? So these are, big issues in the political space. And the PDP just needs to come together and find a solution. Would they be able to soon enough? Only God knows, because in some elections they're losing out already. There's no candidate, I think, in Osun elections, for them. So these are issues that they are facing currently, and will they solve that very soon? Only time will tell.
Could it really be that this subject of zoning, it has become a very ugly clog in the smooth operation of a party movement or a political party? Could it be that this particular subject, if almost every party is having that issue, I'm wondering, it should be this zone, it shouldn't be this zone. For that reason, there is faction all everywhere, causing the party from regress to regress. Rather, you don't move forward, you don't make plans. That's why I'm saying it kind of looks like it's a bit late for you to start having emergency meeting now. Maybe the bigger picture should be how we are going to put ourselves together as a party under that umbrella to work towards the 2027, which is already almost here with you.
Yeah, for a party probably that has also been built on that ideology. Parties it's probably a big ideology in the country, because they want we want fairness, or let it not be like this zone is left out, this region is left out of things at the federal level and all.
So why is it taking them this long to do that? Why is it
you also
really
look at ambitions
this?
of individuals? Can people actually sit back, put their ambitions to the side, to actually, that's another,
very big
thing,
question, because when you talk
well
about being in a party, that this is a party's interest, can we at the end of the day look at the party's interest, which at the long run is talking about the interest of the nation? Because based on your agenda, although we can really say that sometimes we don't really have political parties here that run on agenda, we just run on maybe what is favorable to us. Every party is supposed to have an ideology that really formed them, that really leads them, that is the fire, to their own emotions. But at the end of the day, we don't really have that. We just have people who can afford to leave one party, supposedly one idea, overnight into another, which is why we're having this various, movements. Shouldn't call it the jumpology right now, moving from year to year that we're seeing in party. But can we find a party that we say, or let this PDP, for instance, decide to say, let's think about the idea, let's think about the vision, the goal. Can we just sit down and draw very well? Because we have a people that we are eager to represent.
Big question.
Very big
question. No, that I want to ask. Have they even gotten to that level of being comfortable enough to put up a roadmap and a vision for 2027 with all of this wranglings? That's a big question.
Why?
Have they gotten to that level that we can sit down? Because when you have different factions, there's no how you can sit down to say this is what we have for 2027.
Want.
So
exactly.
that's a big problem, though.
Very.
But two big stories for me. First and foremost, the petrol situation, 1-4 yesterday with a friend when she was buying petrol for her car, it was 1-4 as well.
If that was in the morning that you saw it at 1-4, well, I want to let you know that towards evening it was 1-5.
Okay, so now CNG conversion kits of 100,000 by the federal. I don't know if converting cars to CNG is the perfect solution for this situation. A short-term problem that we have because nobody saw this war coming. It's an immediate. Now, I spoke to a professor of economics yesterday on the news on AIT and talked about how hopefully we have backup, crude from the government. A lot of governments store up crude, petrol and all because of matters like this that might arise later. So do we have backup, for this? And also, how do we block leakages outside our borders, going into, like we always hear people divert crude and all of that. So these are big questions that we need to answer, for ourselves to help mitigate this situation.
Follow up to that question. If we do have the backup stored somewhere, when are we supposed to bring it out? Isn't time like this good enough time to at least bring a portion for us to continue to maintain, that expenditure and all of that? Because it is really telling hard on every Nigerian right now.
Yeah, but I think according to reports, Dangote has taken off 100 naira from
100 naira out of it, but it is still on 1,000 something. 100 naira away from it, 1,000 ahead 75 naira. So, so it's still.
Also, like I said, the second one is on Sheikh Gumi, who's on the papers again.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very interesting.
In about a minute.
A very interesting one. Why do I say that? Because we need a statement from the government on this one, because this is a big one. This is a big statement from him that the federal government knows this, terrorists. They know their locations. They know where they are. He goes there with them to negotiate with them. And we've had, denials of negotiations, here and there. Some individuals, money were not paid. When we ask, how did these people get out, from the hands of their captors? So that's a big one for the government to actually answer, for. And in a normal society, I think you should bring a little bit of heat on them. If we're hearing that, Sheikh Gumi is saying that the government knows these people. So what's happening, with these individuals? Why are they still, going freely doing their terrible business in the country if they know these people? And
what prompted Sheikh Gumi to, at this moment, make that statement? Number one, and if the government is going to counter it, I don't want to, maybe it might not really be the best idea to say it is false, it is malicious, and the usual, vocabulary that we'll find in the press releases. But I think we need to also see facts that follow up on this. And if that was an allegation that, false allegation, very weighty one, then the government has got to make a very decisive action, on really, really dealing with the
police needs to answer, because he said he goes with the police to negotiate with them. I mean, security operatives just need to answer this one. We shouldn't let this just go under the wraps as, it's one of those things that happens in the country.
Thank you so much for being a part of the newspaper review this morning. We'll be taking you to the network studio to bring you the news on the hour, but do not forget that political platform will be coming your way at 9:15, and we will be live right on YouTube. Thank you so much for always being there. It is Raypower Network. Raypower Abuja rather. My name is Dima.
And I'm Chooks. Good morning.
Good morning to you.